Hello, going to talk a little bit about break-even analysis here. Let me go ahead and pull up the file. Okay, so break-even analysis is a very important topic related to business decisions. And it kind of starts off talking about a little, kind of start off the discussion, talk a little bit about two important elements of it. And one is variable cost and the other is fixed cost. Now, variable costs are costs that are based on activity. As activity goes up, variable cost goes up. As activity goes down, variable cost goes down. A lot of times you'll see variable cost as direct materials and direct labor. The more of a product you produce, the more direct labor, the more direct materials you're going to use. The less you produce, the less direct materials, the less direct labor you're going to use. So variable costs are based on activity. Fixed costs, on the other hand, are not based on activity. Fixed cost basically, um, it doesn't really matter whether activity goes up or activity goes down, fixed costs remain constant. Like the rent on your factory, or if you were to buy a store, or if you were to rent a storage facility, basically your rent would be the same regardless of how much activity goes on in the storage facility, regardless of how many boxes you have in there. Rent's going to remain the same. So fixed cost, variable costs are based on activity. Fixed costs are not based on activity. Now, contribution margin is also a very important element of it. Now, contribution margin is defined as the selling price of an item minus the variable cost gives us our unit contribution margin. So if we're producing an item that costs $15, or we're gonna sell it for $15 in the marketplace, and our variable cost to produce it is 9, then we have a unit contribution margin of 6 to make that product. So kind of think of contribution margin is what a company makes off a product based on their direct variable cost of that product, what they make over and above the direct variable cost of that product. Now, we can also look at it as a contribution margin ratio, which the contribution margin ratio would be the unit contribution margin divided by the selling price. So again, with this example, if our unit contribution margin is 6 and our selling price is 15, then 40% of that product's selling price would be related to contribution margin. So contribution margin ratio just tells you what portion of the selling price relates to contribution margin. Now, we can also look at this. So now let's get into some break even. So the basic formula for break even is fixed cost divided by the contribution margin per unit. So in the example that we've been working with, let's say that we have fixed cost of $300,000. And we have, again, the contribution margin per unit of 6. This means we would have to sell 50,000 units in order to break even. Now, break even analysis is very important for business decisions because break even is a point where a company has no profit and loss. So right at 50,000 units here, they have no profit, they have no loss, but all their costs are covered. And from here on out, all their fixed costs are covered. The only cost they're going to incur is the variable cost. So from here on out, their contribution margin is going to be their profit margin. They're going to start making money from this point on. So a lot of times what companies look at is how quickly can we achieve break even? They look at their sales forecast in comparison to break even. The quicker that they hit break even, the quicker that a company starts to make money on a product. And so break even is an important determinant. Um, Also, I'll say this about break even. If you are starting your business and you go for an SBA bank loan, they will make you do a break even analysis for your business because a lot of times a break even analysis will tell you how good of a business plan you've got. Because if your break even is unusually high or going to be very hard to achieve, typically it means you might want to revisit something in your business plan. Maybe you don't have as good a business plan as what you think. Now, you can also look at break even from a standpoint of sales dollars. And in that case, we would take our fixed cost divided by our contribution margin ratio. So we would take fixed cost of 300,000. We'd divide it by the contribution margin ratio of 40% that we got earlier on. We're kind of just working with the same example here as we go through, and we would get 750,000 sales dollars. So this is the sales dollars that we must achieve in order to have break even sales dollars. The sales are in order to achieve break even, as you could say. Now, another way you could do this is if you've got the units, you could simply take the units times the selling price, and that should also give you the 750. So there's a couple of different ways to do it based on if you've already got the units or if you don't. Now, you can also look at this in relation to a target profit. And a target profit means that not only do we want to find out how much we need to sell to break even, how much do we need to sell to hit a certain level of profitability? So in this case, we'd take fixed cost plus the target profit. We'd divide it by our contribution margin per unit. And let's say that our fixed cost again are 300,000, like we looked at before. But let's say we want to make $120,000. Let's say that that is our desired target profit. And so we'd put in the 300,000 plus the 120. It equals 420,000 total. We would divide that by 6, and we would need to sell 70,000 units, not only to break even, but to meet our goal as far as a certain level of target profit. Now, target profit in sales dollars, we could take fixed cost plus the target profit. Again, 420, the same as we looked at in the last example. Divide that by our contribution margin ratio, and that would give us the sales dollars that we need to generate, not only to break even, but to, again, meet our level of target profit. And just like what we looked at with break even, if you've got the units, you can take the units to earn a target profit times the selling price, and that should equal the break even sales, or excuse me, the target profit sales dollars figured with the contribution margin ratio here. Again, a couple of different ways to do the same thing. Now, one other thing I'll mention, and then I'll talk a little bit about how useful this is. So margin of safety is kind of another aspect that you'll see sometimes with this. And that would be your projected sales in dollars. Let me go ahead and put a dollar sign here. Minus the break-even sales gives us your margin of safety. So what margin of safety is what it means is that sales could be off our projection by up to $250,000, and we're still going to be profitable. We're still going to make money because that's what's coming in over and above break even. Now, if sales were to drop more off our projections than 250, we would not be profitable. So margin of safety is that range between break even and projected sales, to where sales could be off, but as long as they fall within that range, we're still going to be profitable. So you will see margin of safety occasionally used to kind of discuss the difference between projected sales and break even sales. Now, why is this so useful? Because this can be adapted to apply to all types of businesses. You can do this with a service company. I did this one time for a small business where I looked at, it was a daycare center. And I had to do this because they were they were getting an SBA loan. And so I basically worked up their pro forma financial statements. I met with the owners and basically came up with a break-even analysis for them, where I looked at, okay, we broke it down to what's your fixed cost, what's your variable cost per child that's going to be in that center, what's going to be your average charge per child. And we came up with like a contribution margin per child. We divided that into the fixed cost. And basically we came up with, I think, about 25 to 30 kids was going to be break even point. We did a little bit of a range there. I can't remember. I think it was 26 maybe, but they had a capacity for 100 kids. And so they had a lot of potential profit there based on the numbers. And so basically, if you're going ever for an SBA loan, you are going to have to fill this out, Small Business Administration loan. You're going to have to fill this out. You're going to have to complete this for your business, projected business. And a lot of times it identifies how good of a business plan you've got. I knew someone one time that was looking to open a restaurant, and they used this for their restaurant. They kind of came up with, okay, what's the average customer going to spend? And that was kind of their selling price. And then they came up with a variable cost per customer, and they came up with a contribution margin per customer. And then they came up with their fixed cost, which was their cost of rent. And they wanted to have a manager and other things. And so basically they ran break even for their restaurant. And it was extremely high for the type of business they were going to be doing. And so it kind of sent them back to the drawing board. And they made a lot of improvements to their plan. And basically later on opened a business with a much better business plan, a much better business idea. And so it's something that one of the reasons you do this a lot of times in business is it improves your business plan. And think about it, if you want to improve break even, what do you do? What do you look at? You can increase your selling price, which will increase your contribution margin per unit. You can decrease your variable cost per unit, which will increase your contribution margin per unit, or you can lower your fixed cost, all of which will improve or decrease the number of units that you have to sell in order to break even. So companies use this a lot, and it can be applied to any type of business. You can adapt this to any type of business, and it's very useful in business decisions. And a lot of times it lets you know maybe we need to improve our plans. Maybe that this plan is not going to work the way it currently is set up. And that's again one of its great uses. Again, break even, very good to know in pretty much all types of business. Take care.